everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tiff Talks Tech. It is the start of a new year, 2026. I'm happy to be back from our little break, and it was very relaxing. I hope you guys had a great break as well. I'm excited because this is going to be a solo episode, and we're going to go through the anatomy of a rollout that actually works. I have rolled out so many different things in my time as a marketer. A lot of things have done really well. A lot of things have straight up flopped. And so let's learn from those mistakes, learn from me and my own failures, and let's dive in. I will say most tech doesn't necessarily fail because it's bad technology. I mean, I have had some amazing products that I'm like, this is so good. Why aren't we all using it? Why aren't we adopting it? But it has failed because I couldn't get everyone to actually use it. In multifamily, we are obsessed with new technology and what it can do for us, like better AI, smarter CRMs, better stacks, faster leasing tools. But we spend very little time talking about what actually happens after that contract is signed and we've brought on that new technology. And then when a tool underperforms, the blame usually goes to a few different places, but it could be the onsite teams just won't use it, the platform wasn't intuitive enough, or we just didn't see any ROI from this. And then a lot of times vendors will come back and be like, actually, we've done the research on your ROI. Here it is, all of that information. In my experience from both the operator side and the vendor side, adoption is really the marker of if a rollout is failing or not necessarily the tech itself. Like I said, I've had some really exciting technologies, but there have been times where we just didn't get the participation and couldn't justify the spend if the teams were not using it. So today I'm going to break down why adoption itself breaks down, what a successful rollout actually looks like, and why it's more of a leadership problem and not necessarily the onsite team's fault when an adoption doesn't go the way we want it to. So first, let's dive into the myth of plug and play. We have sold ourselves on this lie in prop tech that it's just going to plug right in and everything's going to integrate and everything's going to work together just dandy. But it's not a vacuum. In reality, we see a lot of turnover, we see constant fire drills, we see competing priorities and teams who already feel overmeasured and undersupported by the corporate team in many cases. So, I mean, no technology, no matter how good it actually is, can succeed if no one explains why it's important, if no one shows how it fits into their daily workflows, and if no one reinforces the usage after the initial launch. Buying into new technology, it is a strategy decision, but rolling it out, that is more of a change management decision that you really need to get everybody on board with. That is where things can tend to fall apart if you don't have the buy-in of everybody on your team, everybody underneath, and it just kind of trickles down. If you can't really help them see why they need this product, then it's going to be a little bit of a pulling teeth to get them to use it. Now let's talk about where rollouts actually break. Often, we might say, oh, it's because the team's lazy, they don't want to use it. That's not necessarily what it is. Oftentimes it can be because we haven't provided enough clear why and why it's important. The on-site teams, they might hear, we're rolling this out because leadership wants you to do it. Okay, great. And that's where you get a lot of feet dragging of, oh, well, corporate's making us do this. I don't necessarily want to learn a new system, XYZ. What they don't hear is how it's going to help them lease faster, how it's going to make their lives easier, how it could reduce their follow-ups, how it can protect their time and what's valuable for them and their energy and where they're putting it out. If the why is framed only in leadership metrics, like, oh, this is going to save corporate some money, great. I do not care. I wish they would spend more money, That's where the adoption's going to die. So you really need to make sure that they understand what's in it for them, not necessarily, why corporate wants you to do this. Sure, it might be more affordable for them. Sure, it might make their reporting easier. But if the onsite team doesn't understand what is in it for them specifically, then they're not going to care. I wouldn't. Another reason is too many tools and not enough context around it. So like I said, they have so many things in their stack. They have, a CRM always. There's, oh my gosh, so many different AI leasing agents out there that they could be using, so many chat tools, so many dashboards. I mean, when I was on site, I would just hear, please, 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 not another dashboard because they just don't want to learn another thing. And even myself as a marketer, I felt like, okay, yeah, every product has a dashboard. Am I going to use it? I don't know. It depends on if the information is valuable to me. But nobody really answers, when should I use this thing instead of that thing? So, like I said, there are so many different things. It can be kind of overwhelming, but there are nuggets of information that so many different dashboards can bring to the table. And so you kind of need to be able to share, hey, this is when we're going to use this technology, not necessarily for that, because we can get off the rails very quickly if we try to use everything or use one thing for everything. You want to be using best in class, and there are certain times where different platforms are appropriate rather than others. Often we're going to default to what's familiar to us and what's easy for us to use, and we're going to ignore everything else. So we need to understand when and why we are going to use something. The third reason that I have is that often we treat training as a one time event. So we do a big rollout, we do a big kickoff. That's not necessarily a training. And just having that knowledge base and maybe the article and the how to folder, it's not necessarily enablement either. If usage isn't reinforced, modeled by their teams, or tied to some real life scenarios, it's going to disappear the second that things get easy in the office. So, for example, you do that kickoff call, but then we have high turnover and we have a new manager who doesn't even know what this thing is or why it's important. They're not going to push their teams to use it or understand it if they don't get a tutorial themselves. Or if we have standing managers who have been in their position for years and years and years, again, they're going to go back to what's familiar. So, kind of keeping an eye on usage in the initial kickoff, that's really important. And then monitoring that periodically as well. That is going to keep pushing the initiative forward. If it is a tool that's very important to you and your team, then you need to be checking those things consistently. So let's dive into the anatomy of a rollout that actually works and is really successful. Here's one thing that I consistently see when adoption actually sticks, and that its ownership is very clear. So someone's owning the success of the rollout. I've owned a lot of successes of rollouts, or not successes, depending on what the product was or how much energy that I had to implement it. It was up to me as the person who's in charge of the rollout, not necessarily the vendor, not everybody, because everyone's not going to take on that ownership of, why do I need to push this thing forward? A real rollout is going to have an internal champion, a manager reinforcing the expectation, and then clear accountability. Not necessarily punishment, but just more clarity on, hey, this is something that needs to happen. It could be tied to getting extra bonuses. It could be tied to anything, but we need to have some kind of metric that holds the team accountable for using the new tool. Plus, it's also important to get that manager buy-in because they're the ones who are going to reinforce it to the team and it's going to trickle down. As marketers, we are not just marketing to people who want to buy an apartment, people who want to rent at your community. We are also marketing to internal teams, bosses, property managers, leasing agents, everybody all at the same time. And that can be really difficult. But once you get that manager or regional buy in, it is going to make things a lot easier because then you're not the only one just pushing it like, hey, 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 I think this is important. You have people on your side working with you, and that is invaluable. Another thing that really helps is that you want to have adoption designed into your workflows. Successful teams aren't going to ask, well, they use this thing. They're actually going to ask, where does this naturally fit into their day? Is it going to replace something? Is it faster than doing something the old way? Is it clearly tied to outcomes that are important to them? If it just feels like extra work or another thing added to their plate, it's going to fail. It needs to actually fit into the day to day and their workflows so that they'll use it. One thing that really helps is if managers use it first. And this is something that's often missed. So, I mean, not necessarily just property managers. It could be executives, it could be marketing leaders or regional managers, kind of depending on what the product is. But you need to get them like, "Ooh, we have this exclusive thing. I want you to try it. I want you to see how it's used." And that way, when we roll it out across the board, we've already kind of tested it a little bit here and there. And it depends on what exactly it is. You could have them work with some of their team to test it out, whatever makes the most sense. But why roll something out if it's not necessarily going to work for you and your teams the way you want it to? And then the last part of that anatomy is that we need to see wins visible early on. Teams are going to need their proof really quickly. Successful rollouts are going to highlight how many hours are saved, how many leases came from this tool. Here's an example from a real property. It's going to accelerate adoption when people see why it's winning and why it's working for them, and then they're going to continue to use it. Let's talk for a second about the responsibility of the operator versus the vendor. Vendors do have some responsibility in that rollout. They're going to have to worry about the onboarding, the practical use cases. They have to show you that. They're going to have some ongoing enablement that happens between them and the person rolling it out. But the operator really has to own that internal alignment, selling it up and down the chain of command, expectation setting, reinforcing everything beyond just the launch. That lies with the operator's side. You can't outsource that adoption to the vendor because they don't have that internal structure. Every company operates a little bit differently. You can't just rely on them for that. They have so many different things they're also doing. So you have to really just work together on that. If leadership treats a product like, hey, we brought it in, now you guys make it work, right? Like, that's not going to happen. The strongest partnerships we see are when vendors act as the educator, but not necessarily just the trainer, and operators act as change leaders, not just someone who's buying a product. I want to talk for a second about the ROI that we oftentimes ignore. There's a part that no one really talks about, and that's failed adoption. It doesn't just cost money, it also costs team trust. I mean, if they can't trust that what you're bringing to the table is going to help them, then what is going to make your team want to go forward with the next rollout? They can also experience change fatigue. If you're changing a process so many times, that is really going to be difficult. They're going to start confusing things, and that's something we really want to avoid. And like I said, that willingness to try again, they're not going to want to. I mean, adoption is probably going to go down if that is the route that you're taking. Every failed rollout, I mean, it makes the next one harder. And then the onsite teams start thinking, well, this is just going to go away in 6 months, just like the last thing that was rolled out. That's not a tech problem. That's a credibility problem and something that really needs to be kept an eye on. So the next time that a tool fails, think about, did we design adoption? Did we lead the change? And did we support behavior shifts, or did we just buy a software? Because great technology doesn't just create results, the people using the technology consistently create the results. If you're a leader, a marketing, or a vendor listening to this, stop asking, is this a good tool that we should have? Start asking, have we built conditions for adoption to succeed for this tool? And that is where you're going to see the most and the best ROI. So thank you so much for tuning in. I know this was a shorter episode, but I appreciate every single one of you who listen and take what I have to share. Tune in next time, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for more episodes on multifamily technology.